You are listening to Kubernetes Bytes, a podcast bringing you the latest from the world of cloud-native data management. My name is Ryan Wallner, and I'm joined by Bhavin Shah, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be sharing our thoughts on recent cloud-native news and talking to industry experts about their experiences and challenges managing the wealth of data in today's cloud-native ecosystem. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. We're coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. Today is March 21st, 2025. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Bhavin, what's going on, man?
You went into like a radio jockey mode, RJ mode.
Listen, I've been doing this long enough where I'm not sure how it didn't happen earlier, you know?
Nice. True. No, I'm doing good, man. Just staying busy, heads down. But one interesting piece of feedback. I know we spent last episode talking a lot about Italy, right? And we were talking about pizza. I did get like a correction that hey, it was not built that way. Like one of our listeners did reach out to
That's
us on LinkedIn.
awesome. Was it LinkedIn?
Yeah. It's like, guys, it's not built that way. It like something happened to the ground. Again, I again forgot what he said, but it was after the fact that it actually tilted. So correction from the last
Listen,
time.
you know, I'm glad people are listening and able to correct us. We definitely were not confident in that answer. I'm pretty sure I said I'm probably wrong.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you for the correction. Now I will always know
Yeah.
it wasn't built that way. Although it would be kind of cool if it was just tilted.
Yeah, I know. Just how about you? How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm good. I've been getting back outside, doing more mountain biking again, doing more trail work and volunteering.
Nice.
Did some trail work. What was it? Monday, Tuesday? I
Mhm.
forget. I did Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday. Fixed some stuff we did last year, and this weekend, we're working a whole bunch of new trails near me, and it gets me all riled up and excited for the good weather. Technically, I'm in a race this Sunday, a mountain bike
Okay.
race.
Good luck.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm not. I did it for fun.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how competitive I'll actually be, but as long as I don't come back injured, I think that's a
Mhm.
win.
That's a win. Yeah. Yeah. So when you say trail maintenance, what does that mean? Like, are you uprooting trees, removing roots?
So we try to affect the nature as little as possible.
Okay.
So we only cut down trees if they fall.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's like parks that we've worked on, so in
Yeah.
Uxbridge, we built a pump track out of dirt
Mm-hmm.
last year for like kids and adults alike. And dirt pump tracks, unlike pavement ones, need maintenance every year because tires will go over it and create little ruts and stuff like that. Or
Mm-hmm.
we build jump lines and
Okay.
they need to be fixed up every year and just freshened up so people don't get hurt on them. Well, I mean, they can
Okay.
anyway, but in more than they need to be.
Gotcha. Okay.
And there's general like leaf blowing or directionals or trail
Yeah.
signage. And
Trail maps. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, mostly it's a lot of dead fallen trees after the winter
Gotcha. That you have to clean up.
though.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good, right? Because I had a teammate way back when, like maybe 7 years back at this point, who went from North Carolina to Rocky Mountain National Park, and he took
Sweet.
like volunteer time off, and he
Yeah.
spent like a week doing trail maintenance.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that even mean? So I never asked him that question.
It
So thank
depends
you
on
for
what organization you're part of
yeah,
too. Like some hiking trails, you'll do a lot more like rock work.
yeah,
We do rock work too. Sometimes it's on a slope where you do specifically
yeah.
lay rocks in the ground so that it drains, and you're not
Oh,
and you're preventing erosion.
okay,
Is the
okay.
idea, right? Because sloped dirt washes away if there's a trail
Mm-hmm.
on it. So a lot of hiking trails will do maintenance
That's
like
good.
that, and whatnot, but also just keeping them usable, right?
Yeah.
Is like the main first thing.
So do you have like an expert who tells you that hey, put a rock here because this will erode, or you guys are just people who love mountain biking? You're like, yeah, this looks like a place where we should put
No,
rocks.
it's funny you ask, but they do trail building classes every year.
Oh
I try to
wow.
go once a
Okay.
year, so you learn the sort of best techniques to improve trails, do rock
Mm-hmm.
work, do drainage with minimally affecting
Wow.
the ecosystem around it. So we do get trained on it. And then there's beyond that, there's like specific training for individuals who like use the chainsaws and stuff because you're part of an organization.
Mhm.
So they don't want you out there without PPE and a chainsaw going nuts or
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
but yeah, no, there is training, and usually it's that's like once a year you have an opportunity to do that. But otherwise, it's mentorship. So like I didn't know what I was doing with the pump track, but I learned from someone who built one before. So
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
not so much different from technology, I guess. A lot of mentorship and people who know a lot around you. So
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. Thank you for expanding on what trail maintenance means.
you come help me one weekend. How about that?
Yeah. So
8
like
a.m.
literally,
tomorrow. Come on out.
No, yeah, I saw that. Like I saw on Instagram. It's like, ooh, Saturday morning 8 a.m. I can make that. Like,
Hey,
so I was literally thinking about it.
come on over.
Yeah.
I got plenty to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Enough about trail maintenance and mountain
Yeah.
bikes, even though I could probably just have a whole nother podcast on that, to be honest. And noodles.
Oh,
So
I
have
think,
2 more podcasts I want to make, apparently.
yeah. I think you'll need a different co-host because, yeah.
You could be on the
Again,
noodle
I don't
one,
know.
though, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
All right. So we do have an awesome guest. We'll introduce him in just a minute, but we do want to get into the news before we do that. So Bhavin, why don't you start us off on cloud native news that we've missed this week?
Yeah, sure. So this week I wanted to talk about 2 new projects that came across my RSS feeds, I guess. One is Kubefleet. So Kubefleet is supposed to be a cloud native, multi-cluster, multi-cloud solution designed to facilitate deployment, management, and scaling of applications. Again, this is super cool because it's not just a UI for multiple Kubernetes cluster. Like it wouldn't have been impressive if it's just a UI, like, hey, you can view things from one single pane of glass, but this actually helps you with application deployment. So it has intelligence built into it that if you have, similar to how we do topology awareness, and Kubernetes does that on a Kubernetes worker node basis, right? Kubefleet does that across multiple clusters. So you can specify cluster affinity rules, you can specify topology spread, you can specify preferred versus required rules, and you can customize how applications get deployed. They also have a section, again, this is based on what I've read. I haven't tested it out yet, so maybe somebody can test it out and let me know if all of these things are true. But the second is metrics based scheduling. So it will look for the best cluster that's managed inside Kubefleet for provisioning decisions. So it will look at GPU, CPU, memory, and storage resources, come back and then help with the deployment decision. So I think because of these additional features that it talks about, I think I like Kubefleet, and something that I definitely want to try it out on a couple of clusters at least.
Yeah, I'd be interested in how well it worked across like various orchestration types, like EKS, OpenShift, those kind of things. What a weird picture for the blog, though.
I know.
Their link there. It's just a bunch of cows.
Especially when we live in an AI ecosystem where you can generate images.
The news stack. I feel like you dropped the ball on this. Just gonna say. But hey, power to you.
It is hard to find open source images that you can use in blogs. I still remember when I published blogs for Portworx, right? Pixabay and Pexels were the 2 sites I would go and type containers, and after a point I ran out of container images that I could have used for free.
I mean, I think I get it. Like the guy on the horse is like wrangling up the cattle who represent maybe multiple clusters, and maybe it's a stretch. It's just a strange.
It is, man. Hey, let's focus on the technology, not on.
It's Friday. I get a little weird on a Friday. All right. Well, I'll go next then.
Okay.
You may have not known about this supply chain attack that recently happened on TJ Action's changed files. So it's a GitHub action. Basically, a vulnerability in the way personal access tokens were being used on the repository that manages this GitHub action was exposed, therefore allowing malicious actor to run commits to change the GitHub action and how it's used in public repos. And basically what it would do is it changed it so that when you ran it, it would use this malicious version and it would look for all secrets and dump them to the public log file and then be exfiltrated from there. Not a fun one. Definitely not a
Mm-hmm.
fun one. GitHub Actions are super popular. I don't know exactly how many secrets have been exposed or anything like that, but there's a bunch of good articles on it, and it just kind of shows you, security. We've talked about a lot on this podcast, and the article I'm posting is from Wiz. We've had them on the show.
Yep.
Um, you know, it's not just about your Kubernetes cluster and everything. It's about where your software comes from and how it's being built, right, in that supply chain. And rotating access keys for actual cloud resources is not just only, it's where development happens. So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. Hopefully, we'll do some more. I know we have Chain Guard coming up in a future episode. So
Yep.
hopefully we can talk to them a bit more about this. But yeah, that's a fun one.
No, and talking about Wiz, right? You brought up that this article was from Wiz. They just did like they got acquired by Google Cloud. Okay, to lay it out there up front. But man, the number like $32 billion was the acquisition price. That just like
Pays
so
to be in
background.
security, my friend.
Yeah, background for this, right? So last year, Google Cloud had tried to acquire Wiz for $23 billion, and we had covered it during one of the news section. And the Wiz founders had said, "Nope, no, thank you. We will keep doing
You
our
flip
thing, and
those numbers
we'll come."
around, we got a deal.
Yeah, yeah. So they waited like 9 months, and they added $9 billion to the acquisition amount. Man, kudos! Like I remember saying back then that, hey, if this was me, I would have just taken the money and
Pretty
went
good
home. But
appreciation.
yep, I know. No, so congrats to everybody at Wiz. This is definitely a big investment, right? Like this is bigger than, like obviously we are in different times, like 2025. We can't compare it with like acquisitions that Google made over the last decade, but this is bigger in terms of amount, in terms of the YouTube acquisition, the Maps acquisition, all of those. So like this is definitely a substantial amount of money, and I'm excited to see how things evolve and what Google Cloud security means now. So exciting acquisition for sure.
Fun stuff. Fun stuff.
And then one final thing that I had, I don't have a lot of details for it, but we are trying to get a guest to talk about it. But Solo.io have a new tool or in the AI ecosystem called Kagent or K Agent. It's a new open source framework that's designed to help users build and run AI agents on top of Kubernetes. So again, not a lot of details that I could glean from the Newsstag articles, but yeah, we have already started reaching out to people, our friends at Solo, and maybe we'll get somebody to talk about it on the
Yeah,
podcast in details.
and I know we haven't had a lot of content around AI agents, but get used to the word. It's another buzzword. It's another thing
Agentic
in the
AI.
in the ecosystem that's going to be talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Basically, they're just models inside that can perform tasks, ask questions, those kind of things that a user would otherwise have to do,
Yeah.
but obviously using AI. So we are excited to maybe have a guest on to talk about that. And I feel like Cajun sounds like Cajun, and it needs a play on some Cajun food or something. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. It
Nice.
also just made me
Hey.
hungry.
Nice. Hey, the cat is back. Like the kitten is back in your background, man. Come on.
Oh yeah, they are back. They must hear me.
Mhm.
You know.
Talk about Cajun food, and maybe that yeah, makes them hungry too. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, let's introduce our guest.
Yeah.
We have Jemiah Sius on. He's the director of developer relations over at New Relic. So he's going to join us to talk all things sort of like how do you get started in the Kubernetes space. We're going to, as a developer specifically, so we're going to kind of take a step back from a lot of these very specific episodes on solutions and technology, and kind of go back to, here's where we've been in the last 10 years, and if you're coming into the ecosystem now versus some time ago, how does it differ? So yeah, let's get Jemiah on the show. All right, welcome to Kubernetes Bytes. Jemiah, nice to have you here. Why don't you give our listeners a quick introduction of who you are and what you do?
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I am Jemiah Sius. I'm a senior director at New Relic. I lead our developer relations and technical marketing org. Right. So my team thinks about our customers' needs with adopting observability practices and works with them as a part of that journey. in various capacities. But that's what I've been doing. I've been at New Relic for about 6 years. And so, Ryan, Bhavin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you all today.
Awesome. Hey, Jemiah, you said you are at New Relic for 6 years. How long have you been part of the Kubernetes ecosystem?
I really started learning about 3 or so years
Okay.
ago.
Yeah.
Before I was a little intimidated, and would start and I'd stop. But about 3 or so years ago, one of my teams, we kind of operate as customer zero for the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were building out this new application that was needed, and we were going to be using Kubernetes for infrastructure. And I was like, all right, so if I want to understand, what is actually going on, I really got to get into it and just started leaning in a little bit more.
No, that's awesome. I think I want, because I know in our discussion that we had earlier, right? I wanted to get your thoughts on, hey, Kubernetes now is like more than 10 years old. You have
Yeah.
been involved with it actively for 3+ years. I want to get your perspective on like how has like the developers view changed when deciding when to get started learning, or how to get started learning with Kubernetes, and how can they do that. So like I want to see how you got started, and then how can people who are just getting in 2025, how can they get us get started in this ecosystem?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are approaching it similar to how I did, right? You hear about this technology that's supposed to be kind of like this magical tool for helping you deal with infrastructure.
Hmm.
The entire industry was going from, monolithic apps into container-based apps and needing a way to deal with that. And so you just kind of like start exploring.
Yeah.
I can remember when first hearing about Kubernetes, right? I haven't been using it for the entire 10 years, but I can think back, and it was really like a mixture of like, oh, this is exciting and should I trust it,
Yeah.
versus now it's kind of really like a respected, elder technology in this cloud native ecosystem. Like it's
Mhm.
well known. Folks are no longer thinking about like, should I trust this? And it's really
Yeah.
shifting into having a better understanding, right? So it's no more kind of like trying to decipher
Yeah.
things. Because Kubernetes has a steep learning curve, and I just know
Hmm.
resources were scarce. Like it was a bit of a challenge for me in the start. And
Yeah.
now you think about 10 years later, and massive community have been built around Kubernetes. It's much more accessible. It's a wealth of documentation. I think the community is
Hmm.
probably the biggest resource.
Yeah.
And so I really think that now it's more of an ally, or more viewed as like a real tool for folks that are looking to build these kind of like scalable or reliant applications in large enterprise organizations and smaller, apps where folks are just getting started and trying to get things out fast.
Gotcha.
It's a shift.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you, right? I think personally, 6 or 7 years back is when like started diving into Kubernetes. Even before that, like it just felt like, hey, it is like you need to be super technical. You need to know Go as a programming language. You need to know what the code looks like, and then that's when you can actually truly call yourself a Kubernetes expert or a user. Now, at least from what I've seen in my experience, right, like it is easier. Like you don't have to go and know all the internal details of how etcd works or how Kubernetes API server works. There are so many different things in and around the ecosystem of Kubernetes that, yeah, I think it has definitely become easier for sure.
Yeah, absolutely agree, 100%.
Yeah, so that begs the question, right? Which is, where do people actually start? And it's funny because this answer has evolved over the lifespan
Hmm.
of Kubernetes. To your point, Bhavin and Jemiah, like I remember starting off, like if you wanted to deep dive, it was Kubernetes the hard way. Kelsey to Hightower's project.
Yes.
Dive right in and get your hands on. That's completely changed. So, what's your sort of take on where do people start? Do they dive in learning the internals, or can they start somewhere else?
No, I think it's really the fundamentals that where folks are starting at. Like I can tell you, YouTube University, right? It's a big one for me and lots of others out
Sure.
there. But also when I was starting, I leveraged like the AWS workshops kind of like
Hmm.
website, and just allowing kind of like this managed process of deploying and getting in there in a guided way. And that was like incredibly helpful. It removed some of the fear of like having to know it all in the beginning. So I'd say it's definitely a journey, right? And so when you're new coming into Kubernetes, I really think that it's most important to focus on the foundational, parts of it.
Mhm.
So getting an understanding of pod services, deployments. I think
Yeah.
namespaces is a really big one. And then I think over time you will become curious and it's like, okay, like now I understand the foundations. Maybe I want to get into the technicals and start really learning the internals, thinking about the API server, the scheduler, things like that. But I think it can be beneficial in growing your career as an expert. Like if you really want to
Mhm.
have kind of like if you really want to be specialized within your organization. But I think for the most part, a solid grasp of just those basic, the like the fundamental parts of Kubernetes and some hands-on experience
Mhm.
is
Sure.
what
Yeah.
you'll really rely on a day-to-day basis.
I'm curious your take, right, on starting with the fundamentals of Kubernetes, um, which Kubernetes itself builds on other fundamentals, right? So, is it worth kind of even taking a step back to learn container technology before you even dive into what an API server is? I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I was actually gonna say that, right? Like, I think having a strong understanding of just containers and
Yeah,
containerization, what that process looks like, is a massive help right before you start to move into Kubernetes. And so as I got into it, I would step back and just do more work with
yeah,
containers, take courses. Like I'm an avid Udemy customer. So anytime they have
Mhm.
a sale, I'll go and buy 20, 30 courses at one time.
sure,
And I'll
Nice.
probably
nice.
never hit all of these, right? But it's like all of the bits and pieces that you want to know. So I definitely think that if you understand containers, that's going to be kind of like a superpower at
Yeah.
adopting Kubernetes later.
Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. So apart from like Udemy courses, right? I wanted to see how can people set themselves apart. Like I know in like the surveys that are done in our ecosystem, organizations are always kind of complaining about lack of Kubernetes knowledge. That's
Yeah.
one side of the story for sure. But then there's also a place where hey, there are so many CKA, CKAD certified people that how do you set yourself apart? Like how can you go that extra mile, or what does that even mean? Like where should you focus on if you want to set yourself apart from the rest of the ecosystem?
Yeah. Let me think of this from a management standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Because where I sit at, I'm a manager of managers and have
Hmm.
engineers that
Yeah,
are a few levels under me. And it is like, okay, what do you look for when you're hiring a great person on one of
Yeah.
your teams? And as we mentioned, I think understanding containers is incredibly important. And then there's some other technical areas around that, just thinking about the way that we use Kubernetes on my team. And so I think having an understanding of like those core DevOps practices will be absolutely helpful.
Hmm.
Being able to work with CI/CD pipelines, or using Terraform, or having some understanding of infrastructure as code is going to be kind of like a massive help. And then I think you get into other areas of like having some focus on security. There's always
Yeah.
going to be a security thing that
yeah,
pops up that
endless.
you have to learn
Hmm.
how to deal with. And not only because I work at New Relic, I'm just going to be
Yeah.
clear, I really do, but I think observability is
Yeah.
really another thing that will set you apart. Like if you can say, hey, not only can I deploy this application in Kubernetes, I also
Mhm.
understand the concept of like getting the data needed so we can make decisions based off of its performance. I think that that's a key as well. And whether it's New Relic or any other tool, it doesn't matter, but
Mhm.
that's a really big one. And then I think outside of the technical things, there's still a few things, right? Like I do a lot of speaking and recording and
Mhm.
things like that for the company, but I'm inherently introverted, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, and that's true
Sure.
for a lot of engineers, but communication is so important as well. So if you work on that kind of like communication and collaboration, because Kubernetes is really managed across different parts of an organization, I think those things, like you add the technical skill set with those kind of like soft skills and being able to work
Mhm.
with different parts of your org or people that are have different disciplines, that'll be like, okay, yeah, this right here is a star person that we need to really be looking at.
Gotcha. So one follow up there, right? Like, are you in this approach that you mentioned, participating in the community, not by just talking about it, but also if they are submitting PRs or contributing back to the project? Like, do you value that more? Like, hey, if I have two resumes, I'm looking for somebody who has actually contributed code to Kubernetes, or somebody who comes from that sysadmin background, infrastructure background, who has now reskilled to learn about Kubernetes and how to manage that. Like, what would that look like? Do you need to be a contributor, or no? If you have good enough background with
Yeah,
Kubernetes skills,
I
would be
don't,
helpful.
I don't think that you would need to be a contributor, but I
Okay.
absolutely think that it's like a big gold star, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're active in the community, you contributed to the project, or you're just engaged. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of cloud native is, organizations kind of like leveraging the technology to scale or increase velocity, but
Yeah.
also we need those same companies to give back, right? And
Yep.
dedicate resources back. And so that's one of the things that we did do internally. If like we had an entire team that was just focused on contributing out to open telemetry because it was so important. And I've had folks on my team that, are becoming maintainers of certain projects and just highly active in the community. So I think it's a benefit, like absolute benefit if you're active within the community. But if you are a sysadmin, you've done the work, you have the skill set, I'm never really going to count you out either. But a
Yeah.
part of our quarterly planning can be like, okay, well, let's get you engaged and let's see how, if we find something, let's make sure we contribute to the docs or we do something to where we're also working in the community as well.
Yeah, I know contributing is a tough one for some individuals at some companies. Like it's tougher to get things through legal and all that stuff. I've been
Yeah.
in both scenarios, so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like there you could have someone who's just like constantly working on a project internally and just hasn't had the chance to either. So totally get that. And I know, Kubernetes in its own right has been building on a whole bunch of certifications. Obviously, CKA has been around for a while, but even in the last KubeCon, there was brand new ones announced
Yeah.
for new projects and things like that. So, um, you know, they only get so far, right? You could have someone who knows Kubernetes in and out, I feel like, and not have a single certification.
Mhm.
But to your point, Jemiah, it sure does help, right, to
Yeah.
Yeah.
have those things on your on your resume, so to speak. So I do want to have one follow up on sort of this sort of how do you learn concept,
Mhm.
right? We're now in this new age of I have AI to talk to. I have
Mhm.
Chat GPT. I have other models where in my daily workflow, when I'm learning about something, I can use that as a tool. So, as someone who's asked ChatGPT about a kubectl command that I forgot, and it works really well, I want to get your take on sort of where you think the role of AI plays in this ecosystem, especially with someone's sort of learning capability or ramp up time.
Yeah. I think you called it out. I've done it myself as well,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
you you definitely leverage AI these days to kind of like fill in some of those gaps, or I forgot a thing and it's always there for you. And so I think AI is absolutely going to be a game changer for Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem, but also just software development as a whole,
Sure. Yeah.
to where it'll lower that barrier to entry. When we get into a space to where we feel confident about accepting AI generated code, we'll see
Yeah.
that even more. But I do think these days leveraging AI is going to expedite kind of like you onboarding into a project, learning the
Mhm.
technology. It's starting
Yeah.
to fill in some of those gaps. And then I think there are other areas as well, right? So I think as it gets better, we'll see that you not only use it for like onboarding to Kubernetes, but starting to help you automate like complex tasks or help you
Yeah.
drive some of your decisions. But we have to build that
Mhm.
trust.
Yeah.
And then so I think initially it's going to reduce the ramp up time, and then eventually to help you drive decisions, help you manage your infrastructure. But I also think that we should be looking at it as a tool that helps kind of like the humans that's working
Sure.
on the
Yeah.
project, not as a replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like any tool. If you don't have some background knowledge, a tool can get you in trouble, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know why a chainsaw just came up. Maybe because we were talking about them earlier. But like any tool, if you're generating code from AI, or you're asking, well, how do I do this? It's going to spit something out at you. It may not be 100% accurate, and if you have absolutely no background knowledge, which
Yeah.
is you haven't taken the time to learn something yourself, that's where I think maybe we're in this weird gap where like we can't, someone who doesn't have any of that background can't fully trust. And I love that word that you use, because it's not only important to us using new tools, it's important to us as a community, right? And you probably know this really well, that if you don't have trust within the community or a new tool, it's hard to really succeed, I guess, in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, that's why I say observability is going to be such a big part of it.
Yeah.
Not just around Kubernetes, but with everything that's happening with AI. As we're generating code, it's going to increase velocity of the things we ship into production. The infrastructure that we use to manage it's going to become much more important. But we don't have that inherent knowledge, right? We didn't sit and write the lines of code and build the
Yeah.
packages ourselves like we would traditionally do. And so like now having an understanding of it is just so much more. Or having a tool
Yeah.
that helps you understand it's going to be so much more important.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what we'll see in the near future.
Nice. And well, maybe we'll have to have you back on to talk entirely about observability and AI, because that's a whole
Mhm.
nother podcast, I would
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
think so.
We can go
But it's
on
a good one.
forever. Yeah.
Okay, I do have one follow up on Ryan's question, right, around the usage of AI for ramping up. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we spoke about how it can help you learn things faster, but you still can't rely on it completely. But do you need to go into all sorts of details? Because maybe in a year or 2 years, we'll have AI agents embedded into the tools that you're using that can help you do things. So you only need maybe 100 level expertise, and then the tool, the AI agent or chatbot can go into like the 500 level detail and do those complex things for you. Where do you think, like, is it even worth going to that level 500 if I know in a couple of years I might not need it?
I think so,
Interesting.
right? And I agree. I think
Yeah.
we're getting in that direction to where what a software engineer looks like will shift
Yeah.
because of it.
That's a good point.
But I don't think that I personally don't feel like being able to go deep will ever be a problem, right?
Yeah.
So like
Fair point.
there's definitely going to be some like, okay, I don't have to think about this too much. I can push off the tasks that I don't
Yeah.
want to focus on to kind of like my AI tooling, but I'm
Mhm.
still gonna, I want to do these parts, right? Or these are where we really need to have like that human skill set and AI working together. And the
Yeah.
deeper your knowledge is, or the deeper your toolkit is, it's going to better prepare you for that. So I'd say I could see developers wanting to work more in the like,
Mhm.
300 level and allow AI to do all of the
Okay.
higher 100 level stuff that they don't really want to do anyway,
Yeah.
writing documentation or tests and things like that, right? That we're already pushing off there.
No, I agree, right? I think even as part of my day job, uh, right now as a PM, I don't need to know all the frameworks like the back of my hand. I can just like, hey, this is what I'm working on. Can you give me a template for a business case? Like, I need to build this. Can you help me do that? So I don't need to be an expert all the way down, but it's good to know the basics and maybe something extra in a specific field. So I agree with you there. Uh, I think one follow up I have there is, hey, given everything in the ecosystem today, where do you see the gaps exist? Like, where are the gaps? Like, uh, there are learning resources, but are they enough? Like YouTube videos, how are people consuming those? Or do you need more of those labs that you were talking about that AWS has? Like, where are the gaps that we need to fill as a community?
Yeah, I think there's a few places I mentioned earlier, right? Security is always going to be
Mhm.
a thing that we have to think about. I think, and as we've gone through these 10 years, we've matured what we've done with Kubernetes as well. It's
Yeah.
like multi-cluster, multi-cloud. It's like the configuration of what an environment looks like is just completely different. And so I think
Sure.
that thinking about those more mature solutions, how to deal with security in them, how to deal with stateful applications,
Mhm.
when leveraging Kubernetes is a big part of it. And then I think as far as like resources and community, things have absolutely improved over the last 10 years, but there's always more room, right? We can always
Yeah.
try to make onboarding
Sure.
easier. We can always look for more training resources. And I think those are really the things that would stand out as like some gaps.
Yeah.
But the good part about it is that you have, hundreds of thousands of people that are all focused on, kind of closing those gaps. So it's great to see.
Ryan, the thing that pisses me off right now is Jemiah is not giving the podcast format, like let alone Kubernetes Bytes as a podcast, any credit for helping people wrap up, man. Come on.
That would be too nice. Too nice. No, it's a good point. There's a lot, and it's hard for me to remember because a lot of the people that I've sort of dealt with and hired on, they have experience. But I remember also a long time ago coming into the OpenStack community
Mhm.
out of my undergrad and feeling so intimidated. Right. So intimidated because at that point it was like a mature Kubernetes ecosystem. I was like, where do I even go? Right. But it was a very similar point where that ecosystem was huge and there's hundreds of thousands of people and developers, but like just like getting off the ground can be a really intimidating factor. And I was introverted too. I've kind of made this sort of chameleon version of myself doing podcasts and whatnot. So I'm curious, right? Like just off the back of your hand, Jemiah, like if someone's coming out of school, for instance, and has no skill set,
Yeah.
Mhm.
is it best for them to go to a community or is it best for them to go to learning resources?
I think it has to be both, right? I
Yeah.
would say starting with the official documentation, right? Like that's the first place that I always go for anything that I want to learn.
Sure.
And then what I would normally do after I've spent some time in the docs is just try to get an example project up and running, something that I truly don't care about per se, but I can spend a weekend kind of like getting hands on with it. That's just the way that I consume information. And then, as I mentioned before, I just buy a bunch of courses. So
Yeah.
Udemy,
Yeah.
Udacity, like looking for those learning tools. And what I do sometimes is just I'll buy the course and look for the chapters of like the thing that I really need to learn in this
Sure.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think those resources help, but always leaning into the community, like the CNCF Slack channel and things like that. You have
Yeah.
a bunch of people that are passionate about the same technology. It's a resource to you.
Got it. And I think let's take the example also of you're at your existing job, right? Um, are there particular resources that can have a better impact? Like you mentioned Udemy, you mentioned YouTube, you mentioned various other ones. I mean, there's also just like a colleague who knows a lot more. That there's always a lot of people that know a lot more than I do, right? So, curious at an existing job, right? Which areas do you kind of go after to make a bigger impact?
In regards to like at work or
Yeah, so if you like have an existing position to learn, you have to kind of level up Kubernetes in this case instead of get started, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I guess to add to his example, right? Like I'm a VMware admin, and now companies are moving to OpenShift virtualization, which is what we keep hearing about. How do I upskill for that scenario so I can have a bigger impact?
Yeah, I think a part of what I would do is look for that internal subject matter expert, right?
Mhm.
And try to build a bridge there, understand kind of like what they're working on, what they think a great getting started point would look like. We have like these concept of wizards internally. And so just kind of like leaning into
okay,
those
yeah,
channels, right? I think that could be awesome. And then
Mhm.
what I would do before is try to volunteer onto like a project of
Yeah.
like, let me shadow, let me, get some real world experience. And I think that normally helps. Outside of that, if you're, let's say, if you're like a network admin or someone that's trying to, shift, I think that may be when like even looking at some of those certifications could be
sure,
helpful,
sure,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
So, Jemai, like I think in the first half of the episode, right, you said you are a manager of managers. How do
Yeah.
you implement such a culture in like for people that want to? Like you said, you learned Kubernetes while at New Relic. How do
Yeah.
you set a as a leader? How do you set a culture where hey, it is okay that like your KPIs are KPIs, but then we want you to grow as an individual. How do you set that inside an organization?
Yeah. So because of where I sit at, I think it's incredibly important that I vocalize that. And then
Yeah.
so I do it with each one of my team members, right? So it's not just let's talk about your projects, but let's also
Yeah.
talk about your career and what you should be learning to get you where you want to go. And then so I have individuals that express what they want to do. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to sponsor this course for you.
Yeah.
And then as a part of your quarterly plans, let's talk about your progress through it all. And so I do that with every member in my team. For the developer relations org that reported to me, I'd
Mhm.
say 20% of your work time is actually learning, right?
Mhm.
Because
Nice.
in order for you to work in the community and share insight, you got to get hands on with it. You have to kind
Yeah.
of like look inside of it. So it's just carving out that time, understanding that there's a lot of learning to be done, and that's a part of growth. So kind of like
Mhm.
tracking and buying into it, I think is what I prefer to do.
Okay, and one more question on this, right? Because I've been part of organizations where, hey, they would give me my 20% time, but I need to prove that at the end of the quarter I can pass a specific certification. Do you think that's an important milestone, or hey, as long as you feel that you are an expert, that's good, and I don't need to show me a proof that yeah you are now certified and you know now a Kubernetes expert. Where do you draw
Yeah,
the line? Yeah,
it's in a gray area, right? Like as a
yeah,
manager, like I want to make sure my developers or my team's being productive, right?
yeah,
But it's also like, is the certification the proof of that? Like I could have
yeah.
just crammed nothing and passed the test.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I don't think that the certification is the answer, but I do think as you're on this journey with your
Hmm.
employee, you can plan for deliverables and ways that they
Yeah,
can implement. So sometimes it's like, okay, well, let's learn this and then see how we can get you a win with it. Like, how will
yeah.
you apply it to your projects? How do we build this into just demoing some of the work that the team's doing, right? And so you make it where the learning time
Hmm.
is useful. And then
Yep.
another thing that I do randomly is like, okay, this quarter we're gonna do a 1 week hackathon, and you all work on whatever you want as a part of this. Like, we're gonna tie it to quarterly goals,
Yeah.
and we present what we did at the end of that week, and some of it scales into large scale projects. So I try to find interesting ways that say, okay, I can see the work that you've done versus
No,
it just
I
you
love
have.
that answer, man. Like I love that answer. Like thank you. Like I don't want to measure everyone on just a certification. It's the impact. Like driving hackathon projects. I think that's a neat approach. So okay, let's say I've been in the Kubernetes ecosystem for a year, and I know the basics. Where do you see the bigger areas of growth are for Kubernetes going forward? Like what skills, like security is one route, observability, open telemetry is another route, AI on Kubernetes is another route. Where should I invest my time to make sure that 3 years down the line these skills are still relevant, and I'm not looking out for looking for a new job?
I think you mentioned a lot of it, right? I'd say you definitely want to keep AI in mind.
Hmm.
Everyone's talking about it. Every company's focused on it. I think 70% of all enterprise companies are looking to adopt AI right now in some
Hmm.
capacity. And so some folks feel like it's just a buzzword and it's kind of like an AI wash that's
Yeah.
happening. But I think it's at the level, it's like you have to pay it attention. The better that you can understand it, the easier it is for
Hmm.
you to, I just add that to your tool belt. And then I think that we'll see things around like edge computing become even more important as
Yeah.
time goes on. And so you want to have some focus there, just kind of like track what's happening. Serverless architecture is incredibly important, and I
Hmm.
think that's only going to grow as well. And so I think if you focus on those areas, then you'll keep yourself relevant and just always stay curious, right?
Yeah.
Always be adaptable as like the landscape shifts. Even me, I'm a bit older. I don't get to write code as much as I used to have to, but it's like I still want to
Sure.
know what's
Yeah.
going on. I still
Yeah.
want to tinker on it. I may never deploy a thing into production again, and that's okay. But I'm
Sure.
still
Yeah.
gonna try to learn and get hands on with it, just so I can be aware of what's happening in the industry.
No,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead, Ryan.
no, it's a great point. I think the idea of always being willing to learn, right, is a really strong one, and I've always thought that. Which kind of brings me to a separate point, which is um, sort of introspective in a way, maybe towards you, Jemiah. Which is, if you did it over again with the way you learned from 3 years ago, would you do anything different?
I would honestly first I wouldn't because I would start and I'd stop. It's just like just being a little intimidated, right? So I power through that. I would have leaned into the community a bit more in the beginning, right? And I think that there was so much
Mhm.
excitement
Right.
about it
Yeah.
that that was really a miss on my part. I kind of waited until it was like, oh, this is absolutely necessary. I need to know exactly what's happening and
Yeah.
kind of get there and use it. And so I wouldn't say my approach was the right one, but it worked out in my situation. But those are two of the things that I would have done. And then now I'm like I consider Kelsey to be a friend, right? And so
Mhm.
I
Nice.
would have been friends with him a bit earlier and just kind of like learned from him, like
Nice, nice.
what is this and how do I
Yeah.
actually use it? I think that that's probably what I would have done.
Well, that's awesome. And so, your role at New Relic, I'm curious, what sort of things you're up to there. Where can people go to learn more specifically about what you're doing there, or even just get in contact with you?
Yeah. So getting in contact with me, feel free. Like LinkedIn is probably the best place. I got off of most socials. I still have a Twitter. I'm not active on there at
Nice.
all. So,
Pretty
but
rare for developer relations.
LinkedIn is a pretty good one to connect with me on, and just always feel free to connect, reach out, ask
Mhm.
questions. I try to be welcoming. And then you can catch me or my team, especially the developer relations team, all over the place. Like they're speaking at all the conferences and doing the talks. Right now, we're having a road show, I think, in like 17 cities. So just any of that New
Nice.
Relic stuff, you'll normally find some of my team members at. And then for absolute connection, I'd say LinkedIn.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I think we could talk all day about community and sort of where the Kubernetes community is going, but we'll probably wrap it up here. Is there anything else you want to bring to our listeners and for those learning about Kubernetes before we get settled up here?
I just reiterate my point, right? Stay curious, adapt to what's happening in the industry, and tinker. Like for me,
Yeah.
getting hands on with it is the most important part. And so just kind of like those tidbits, it's a fun journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jemiah, for joining Kubernetes Bytes, and we'll hopefully have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I love to join. Thank you guys.
All right, Bhavin, that was a good conversation with Jemiah. I know we've been excited for that conversation. We always you can hear my cats again playing with
Mhm.
toys. Sorry, I will unblur next time, okay?
Yes.
If for
Thank
the
you.
cats.
Yeah, it would be fun to look at somebody else than just
It's
you.
true.
So
The cats are way more interesting
yeah.
than me. So let's be honest. Anyway, so Jemiah, it was really good to get back to sort of the roots of how you get started in the ecosystem and
Mhm.
where you go to learn. My big takeaway is that there's a bountiful amount of places you can go to learn, and places like YouTube and Udemy and stuff like that are still awesome resources for
Mhm.
getting started in the ecosystem. I specifically like when Udemy has a sale, he buys like
Yeah.
a bunch of content and then kind of
Mhm.
pick and chooses out of that library that he's built for himself
Yeah.
rather than saying like, oh, I want to learn about this, let me just wait and do that one thing. Let's just buy it all so I have it,
Yep.
so I have my own library, right? Which is a fun way to do it, but it just shows you that you can get your hands on a lot of really useful sort of content, and
Mhm.
not to mention the open communities and things that are out there for you to communicate with other people, with like-minded people, I should say.
Oh yeah, no, agreed, right? I think in addition to the sale that Udemy runs every year, I think they should at this point they should sponsor us. But keeping that aside, even the Linux Foundation runs discounts during Black Friday. I think for sure they run it multiple times a year. But the certification training, certification exams, all of those are on discount as well. So if you are new to this ecosystem, don't worry, like you're not late. Like the Kubernetes is still evolving. It's not that this technology is done and now we all of us are moving to something else. This is a technology stack that's here to stay. If you're new, I loved how Jemiah basically helped us set a vision or set a standard for leaders, right, in the organization that want to drive growth from their
Yeah.
employee on their employees behalf. Like, hey, how can I set a culture in place where people feel comfortable dedicating at least 20% of their time in learning new skills. Even if I especially like when he didn't tie it to a certification, but maybe even a hackathon project, or bringing those new skills into use in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think all of those things are super important, especially when you have support of your leadership team. So that's great. And one thing I want to add is, hey, it is fun to learn in public. Like, people will judge you, but not really. Like, if we'll make fun of you if you find if we personally find you doing something that's not correct. But hey, this is the journey. Like, Ryan and I
That's just rude, Bhavin. You're gonna make fun of some. I mean, like, that's literally what they don't want.
No, but again, don't worry. Like, we don't mean any harm. But like, that's how we learned these things, right? You really feel we haven't grown since we started doing this podcast like 4.5 years back. There's so many new things we learned, and we were wrong, and we get an opportunity to talk to experts. So I think it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. Just leave those inhibitions aside. Just start putting things on LinkedIn. This is what I learned. Start tagging us if you want. If we can do whatever we can to help you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll even say, we'll put the offer out. If you're just getting started in this ecosystem, feel free to reach out to Bhavin and I. We can even have an episode with you on it, and we can talk about the questions you have, or even join our Slack or whatever. We're open to it. And I think that's just like the mindset a lot of us have. Not every single one, but a lot of us, right? Yeah. So we're mostly harmless, except for Bhavin.
When I got started, I was like, as I mentioned to Jemiah, right? Like, it felt that, if you're a contributor, only if you are writing code and committing PRs or submitting PRs, that's how you are part of the community, and that's how you feel included. But not really, right? Like, this is our way of helping us out. You find your own way of learning and helping out the community. It's just give and take. Like, okay, this is what this community is about. Like, it's an awesome place to be. So don't worry about, I don't know, looking stupid for half an hour, but then learning over a year. So all good.
I think Bhavin off his soap. Well,
yeah. I'm just saying, like, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. Don't think about things.
It's all good. Is really what you're saying. Awesome. Well, as always, for those listening, please share the podcast. Let your friends and colleagues, grandmothers, whoever, know about the podcast, and join the Slack. Follow us on YouTube. All those things. Please, we very much appreciate it, and thank you for listening. This brings us to the end of another episode. I'm Ryan.
I'm Bhavin.
Thanks for joining another episode of Kubernetes Bytes. Thank you for listening to the Kubernetes Bytes podcast.